have low vision or another print disability that makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org. And good morning. Your Niagara Frontier radio reading service now presents a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, July 6th. And your readers today are
Ed Howard
and Ted Pajacki. And we hope that you had a pleasant holiday weekend, and we're going to buckle down to some fireworks in the skies, I guess. Today is mostly going to be cloudy with high humidity and thunderstorms, a high of 76. Tonight, it'll be partly cloudy, and again, the humidity will be sticking around with a low of 64. Tomorrow will be partly sunny with a high of 81, and then Wednesday, again, partly sunny with a high of 85. And then Thursday, the thunderstorms will return in spots, and it'll be breezy in the morning with a high of 84. Now, the normal high and low for this day are 80 and 63, so we're pretty much right in that neighborhood. The record high was 95 in 1993, and the record low, a chilly 47 in 1961. The weather trivia question for today is it possible to be hot and humid without haze? And the answer is yes. Pure tropical air masses are usually very clear. So I guess we don't have to have those lazy, hazy days of summer anymore.
Well, it's still going to be hot this summer no matter what, I'm afraid.
You think so?
Turning to the front page of today's Buffalo News, our first story is headline, Schools Leader Mubenga Still Showing Optimism. Buffalo Schools Superintendent looks back on an active first year, but there are major hurdles ahead. Summer break will be a much-needed respite for Buffalo Public Schools Superintendent Pascal Mubenga, who is about a month away from completing his first calendar year at the district helm. The new superintendent, who arrived in Buffalo after a 7-year stint leading Durham Public Schools in North Carolina, has celebrated successes from his first year. They include unanimous passage of a $1.4 billion budget, a prize lottery to reward student attendance, a collaborative effort with unions to develop an agency program for the highest need students with autism, and a new strategic plan developed with roughly 60 district and community representatives. But Mubenga sat down with the Buffalo News in June to discuss initial challenges he's faced in running the district of about 29,000 students, as well as obstacles that loom ahead. I was very optimistic when I came in, and I remain optimistic, Mubenga said. I was able to see the talent that we have and the resources that we have, and couple that with the challenges that we have. When Mubenga was hired as superintendent, Buffalo School Board members defended the choice by emphasizing his comfort in leading urban districts and his track record of turning around schools with poor academic performance, not the financial management issues that preceded his term departure from Durham. While he had a rough sense of Buffalo's academic standing, with fewer than 30% of students reaching state proficiency in math and English, designations from the State Education Department released in November revealed a more dire situation. Of its 60 schools, Buffalo went from 21 in the state's lowest designation, that is, Comprehensive Support and Improvement, or CSI, to 35, and from 3 schools in receivership to 5. The State Education Department tries to stimulate progress by equipping these schools with more funding to help them implement a thorough, self-developed improvement plan. Buffalo's superintendent is confident that if the district follows the strategic plan established in May, the state pressure can be alleviated. We have qualified principals, we have qualified teachers. It can be done, Mubenga said. We can clean up some of those designations, and we have enough resources to make it happen. Mubenga is hopeful that the district's CSI schools will drop from 35 to 28 next school year, and then as low as 18 once the plan has been implemented. He's tried to balance demanding non-negotiables for all schools while recognizing individual schools might have their own pathways to success. One size does not fit all, Mubanga said, explaining that the recipe or playbook he would use for schools such as City Honors and Olmsted is different than what he would stress at Bennett and Burgard. A former principal himself, Mubanga knows the rigors of building leadership like, quote, making 1,000 decisions every day, unquote. His actions have shown that he will heed their needs, such as when he devoted his budget add-backs to hiring more assistant principals. Since his start in August, Mubanga has consistently stated that a principal's primary responsibility in their building is instructional leadership, an emphasis that varied significantly between buildings when he arrived. He's had to intervene a few times this year when some principals veered from district-wide expectations, he said. I saw some of those practices continue, he said. People were trying to do their own thing. Mubanga has been a regular at monthly principal meetings. He said he's looking forward to the principal's retreat in September, during which student discipline will be among the key topics of discussion. He said he's already compromised on some issues, such as when he and high school principals disagreed on the future Pathways Academy, a virtual alternative model that had limited student participation. The superintendent wanted to close the program mid-year while the principals wanted to keep it open. He compromised and allowed it to continue through the end of the school year. I want you to push back, Mubanga said, to be honest with me. Then I'll tell you my experience and we'll get a consensus. Mubanga has been able to reshape the layer of leadership between superintendent and the 60 principals. 4 of the 5 associate superintendents of school leadership will be his hires. The district's usual shuffling of principals between schools is already afoot, with 2 retirements sparking significant movement ahead of the next school year.
Also on today's front page, President heads for a tense NATO summit with Zelensky and allies. President Trump will meet with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky at a NATO summit in Turkey on Wednesday that will be charged with tension over the U.S. leaders' views on Greenland, European defense spending, and the Iran war. Trump arrives in Turkey tomorrow when he will meet with the President Recep Tayyip Erdogan before a summit with the full defense alliance the next day, the White House spokesman Anna Calley said. Trump, who has had an up-and-down relationship with Zelensky, had pledged as a presidential candidate to end Russia's war with Ukraine within a day once he returned to office. The war started in February 2022, and Trump has been frustrated by an inability to end it. European leaders who Trump has criticized over tepid support for his war with Iran have called for new U.S. and European efforts to support new peace talks between Russia and Ukraine. The White House has been preoccupied for months with the conflict in Iran, leaving U.S. brokered talks between Kiev and Moscow stalled. Trump spoke to President of Russia Vladimir Putin on Saturday about Ukraine and the upcoming summit, Kremlin foreign policy aide Yuri Ushakov said. Ukraine has increasingly targeted sites deep inside Russia with long-range drones and missiles, showing strength against its much larger opponent. But a U.S. official told reporters on Sunday the administration still viewed the conflict as one in which neither side is making much progress. Trump will speak to Zelensky about trying to end the war. The official, speaking on the condition of anonymity, told reporters on a conference call. Ties between Washington and NATO, rarely warm under Trump, have worsened since the U.S. and Israel launched their war on Iran on February 28th. The conflict sparked a global energy crisis with the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, halting oil and gas shipments. U.S. allies who are not consulted ahead of the strikes grappled with the fallout. Trump has lashed out at several NATO members who declined to allow the U.S. to use military bases to carry out early strikes, and for failing to help the U.S. reopen the strait. The president has also berated partners for not raising their defense spending to 5% of the GPD and repeatedly questioned whether the U.S. is getting enough from its allies. President Trump expects all allies to step up immediately and not only get a sustainable path to the 5%, but get to 5% as soon as possible, U.S. Ambassador to NATO Matt Whitaker told reporters on a conference call, calling an increase in European defense spending really crucial. The U.S. has rattled allies in recent months with shifting announcements about pulling troops and resources from Europe. The U.S. has said it will withdraw 5,000 troops from the continent and slash the military assets that Washington would provide in the event of a crisis. The president has also angered European nations with his aim to take over Greenland, which is part of NATO ally Denmark. The U.S. official said Trump still wanted to acquire the territory, but was exploring other options in the face of European opposition to that plan. Late last month, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte tried to soothe tensions during a visit to Washington. Rutte made a hard sell for the alliance, praising Trump for pushing countries to boost their defense spending and insisting European allies were standing alongside Washington. U.S. President, who has had a warm relationship with Rutte, for his part seemed largely unmoved, reiterating at one point that allies weren't there for the U.S. Rutte, who once praised Trump as NATO's daddy, has faced his own blowback in Europe from what some say has been a too differential approach to the U.S. president. Ahead of last month's Group of Seven Leaders Summit, senior administration officials said the U.S. was happy with some of the burden shifting of defense commitments to European countries and is looking for more. Fears of Russia expanding its war beyond Ukraine to other parts of Europe has heightened tension throughout the continent. Putin has said he is willing to continue talks with U.S. envoys on ending the war, but has rejected a proposal to halt long-range strikes that have damaged both sides. The Kremlin has pushed maximist. Whoops, I just lost my page here. Here it comes back. Fears of Russia expanding its war beyond Ukraine to other parts of Europe have heightened the tension throughout the country. Putin has said he's willing to continue talks to the U.S. envoys on ending the war, but has rejected a proposal to halt long-range strikes that have damaged both sides. The Kremlin has pushed maximalist demands for Ukraine territory, including land Russia has failed to capture by force. In June, Putin rejected an offer from Zelensky for face-to-face negotiations.
Well, now it's time to turn to the editorial page, and today's editorial is headlined, Keep at It. Reviving downtown as a place to go will take steady investment and work. Downtown Buffalo's recovery will be measured by whether people decide on an ordinary Thursday evening or a Saturday afternoon that downtown is where they want to spend their time. M&T Bank's Meet Me Downtown wants to make that decision a no-brainer. The program brings together businesses, nonprofit organizations, and public officials to support a summer calendar that includes Home by 10 block parties, Street Soccer Cup and World Cup Watch Party, Pickle Fest, the main block party, and Circle the Square, add Buffalo Place's Thursday at Main concerts, the Downtown Country Market, new pickleball courts at Fountain Plaza, and Canalside's growing lineup of activities, and a pattern starts to emerge. Downtown is offering to host a smaller activities to capture the interest of workers who have been called back into the office and those who might voluntarily wander down for the food, fun, and festivities. This isn't just for fun. Buffalo's business sector needs the boost. Mayor Sean Ryan has repeatedly argued that downtown needs activity 365 days a year. He's right. Festivals draw tens of thousands, but they cannot sustain restaurants, retailers, and entertainment venues every week of the year. Downtown needs regular foot traffic. That need has become even more pressing since the pandemic permanently altered work habits and thousands fewer employees commuted downtown daily. Restaurants and other small businesses have suffered from the absence of these workers. As the News' Matt Glynn reported, downtown has struggled to rebound from the pandemic-era vacancies. The lower numbers are startling. In 2024, city officials estimated 20,000 fewer workers were coming downtown on a typical weekday. Those lower numbers have taken a toll on restaurants and retailers that rely on a steady flow of foot traffic during the week. It's an absence that is difficult, if not impossible, to replace, weakening the downtown economy's bottom line. Workers are beginning to return. Major employers, including M&T Bank and Delaware North, have expanded their return-to-office requirements, while Ingram Micro recently relocated approximately 1,200 employees downtown. Now, those people need reasons to stay after work, as well as return on weekends with their families. That's where these micro activities can play a role in the form of a free concert, an outdoor pickleball game, a street soccer tournament, or an evening dance party. They create the expectation that something is always happening downtown. Buffalo already has an example of how that works. Larkinville, just a mile down from the downtown core, did not become one of the region's most successful districts overnight. The place is buzzing with workers, restaurants, food trucks, yoga, live music, and yes, pickleball. Larkinville's transformation as the place to be took more than a couple of decades of investment, programming, and hard work. Vibrancy is built through consistency. Businesses must continue investing in programming, and government should ensure that spaces in which they want people to spend time are safe, clean, and easy to navigate. Downtown's revival will succeed if business, government, and community organizations continue working together long after the summer ends.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 18 minutes after the hour. And now next we have our Another Voice column, and today's is on health care. And it was submitted by Meredith Alderkirk, who is the Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood of Central and Western New York. And the headline is, "Abortion rates haven't fallen, but access has." 4 years ago, the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson, Women's Health Organization, nearly overturned the constitutional right to abortion care. Supporters of the decision claimed it would return the issue to the states, a phrase that sounded neutral but masked its real impact. 4 years later, one thing is clear: banning abortion doesn't mean fewer abortions. In 2025, there were an estimated 1.126 million abortions in the United States, essentially unchanged from 2024 and higher than pre-Dobbs levels. What has changed is access. Since June 2022, 13 states have total abortion bans, forcing patients to travel hundreds of miles and take on costs that they cannot afford. In 2024 alone, approximately 155,000 people traveled across state lines for abortion care. Patients delay care while piecing together transportation, lodging, child care, and time off from work. Some continue their pregnancies only because they can't get to an access state. After bans took effect, travel costs more than doubled from $179 to $372. Sometimes the consequences of these unrelenting attacks on reproductive care are obvious. Headline-making stories about doctors waiting to treat a miscarrying patient because new restrictions are written by politicians sorely lacking any understanding of obstetric and gynecological care. Just as often, the impacts are quieter, couched in a difficult-to-understand budget policy. In the last year alone, have stripped Planned Parenthood health centers of critical funding, blocking patients from seeing trusted providers, even for services that have nothing to do with abortion. This has never been about abortion or protecting patients. It's about control. But we are not backing down from this fight. Healthcare should be guided by medical professionals, not politicians. 4 years later, we're seeing a deepening divide between who gets access to care and who is forced to carry the burden of a system designed to make everything harder. Our patients deserve better. The fight for reproductive freedom didn't end with Dobbs. Neither did our commitment to the people who depend upon us. Care continues no matter what.
Well, now it's time for our editorial cartoon, and today's cartoon comes from Steve Kelly of Creator Syndicate, and this is a single panel cartoon, and on the left-hand side we have a donkey and an elephant, and on the right-hand side we have Uncle Sam, and between them is a table with a birthday cake on it that says Happy Birthday America. And on the left-hand side, the elephant and the donkey are saying, "Wow, you look great. Think you'll make it another 250 years?" To which Uncle Sam replies, "Maybe, if you two stop acting like 3-year-olds." I think that's pretty clear what the intent is there. And that's today's political cartoon.
All right. And now we turn to some of the opinion pieces from national sources. And our first one comes to us from Barbara McQuaid. And the headline is, "The Supreme Court gave the rich even more political power." The flow of money into U.S. politics is already harming democracy, and now it's about to get worse. The Supreme Court on Tuesday struck down limits on campaign expenditures by political parties in coordination with candidates in a 6-3 decision that only continues the problematic trend started by Citizens United versus FEC. Without these limits, ultra-wealthy donors, and thus special interests like the firearms and cryptocurrency industries, can essentially buy themselves a favorable treatment by elected officials, diminishing the concept of one person, one vote that is so sacred to the Constitution. To reach its problematic decision, the court also continued its assault on precedent, overturning a case that had upheld such limits as recently as 2001. Tuesday's case, the National Republican Senatorial Committee, NRSC, versus Federal Election Commission, FEC, had been brought by Republican groups and individuals, including Vice President Vance when he was still a U.S. Senator from Ohio. They argued that the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1972, which set the coordination limits, violated the First Amendment rights to free speech and free association by preventing national and state political party committees from coordinating advertising messaging with the candidate of their choice. Existing laws permit national political parties to make large expenditures for individual candidates, up to about $130,000 for candidates for the House of Representatives and more than $4 million for candidates for the Senate. But now, a majority of the justices have said no to any limits on that spending at all. The Supreme Court has long held that even laws that restrict constitutional rights are permissible so long as they pass what is known as strict scrutiny, which is a standard that requires restrictions to advance a compelling government interest and be narrowly tailored to achieve that interest. But the 55-year-old campaign finance law failed that test, according to the justices. Writing for the majority, Justice Brett Kavanaugh focused on the important and traditional role of political parties during campaigns. He reasoned that coordination limits weren't permissible because they impair the party's traditional forms of communication, such as advertisements, preclude parties from amplifying the voice of their adherents, impose additional monetary costs and burdens on political parties, and inflict a stifling effect on the ability of the party to do what it exists to do. The NRSC had argued that the purpose of the Federal Election Campaign Act, to reduce the influence of money in politics, was invalid, and that the only basis for constitutional restrictions is to prevent quid pro quo corruption, that is, the direct payment of money in exchange for official acts. In fact, the challengers argued that a decision removing the limits on expenditure by political parties would, in fact, provide greater transparency in campaign finance. In their reasoning, large donors would no longer need to funnel their contributions through super PACs, which are not required to disclose their donor lists, and instead make contributions to parties, which are. Since Citizens United versus FEC in 2010, which recognized political spending by corporations and unions as a form of free speech, large donors have enjoyed outsized influence on American elections. In 2024, for example, super PACs spent more than $2.6 billion on elections. Tech CEO Elon Musk alone donated more than $240 million to pro-Trump super PACs. The idea that corruption is the only compelling government interest that is legally permissible is an overreach by the Supreme Court into the province of the legislative branch. The Democratic National Committee, the DNC, as an intervening party to the case, had positively opposed and argued that the unlimited coordinated spending would effectively erode limits on contributions. Because money is fungible by paying a candidate's bills, a party is essentially handing him cash, undermining any limits on contributions. In Justice Elena Kagan's dissent, joined by Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Ketanji Brown Jackson, she agreed that the court was opening the door to the very kind of corruption the statute was meant to prevent, that striking down the law would allow donors to circumvent donor limits. A candidate could ask a donor to make a substantial contribution to the party so as to finance his own campaign expenses, Kagan wrote. The donor would give far more to the party than to the candidate directly, understanding that the money would be passed through to the candidate. The writing appeared to be on the wall when the justices accepted the case for consideration last year. The lower courts had rejected the challenge, citing the High Court's 2001 decision in FEC versus Colorado Federal Republican Campaign Committee, which upheld the limits. And there's no need for the High Court to take up the case just to follow precedent. Instead, they overturned it. With the Federal Election Campaign Act of 1972, Congress had sought to reduce the amount of money in politics to protect ordinary voters from being overshadowed by the influence of wealthy donors. After the gutting of the key provision, however, those with the means can now flood the airwaves with their support of a candidate, even if their interests are out of step with the American people. By refusing to permit even reasonable limits on coordinated expenditures in campaign financing, is it any surprise that U.S. politics skew in favor of the wealthy and the powerful?
You're listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio reading service. The time is 31 minutes past the hour, and our next column comes from Elizabeth Shackelford, who writes for the Chicago Tribune, and the headline on her column is, "Civil Servants Should Refuse to Implement Cruel Policies." She writes, "Last year, President Trump's administration began negotiating agreements with African countries to dump America's deportees at their doors, regardless of their country of origin. Trump officials were frustrated with obstacles to mass deportation and saw these deals as one way to speed up. Given this administration's affinity for casual cruelty, I'm not surprised that this is happening, but I am deeply disappointed that career diplomats are facilitating it. These acts violate U.S. law, international law, and basic morality. It brings up a question civil servants face every day under an increasingly abusive administration. Should you stay or should you go? Many of these countries are well known for horrific human rights abuses, lack of justice, and abysmal detention conditions. Some are at war. The U.S. government considers three, South Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Central African Republic, so dangerous that they have the worst possible travel advisory, level 4, do not travel. In June, the administration sent about 20 migrants to the Central African Republic, including a pro-democracy activist from Iran who had been granted legal protection by a U.S. immigration court. Men from Cuba, Myanmar, and Laos were deported to South Sudan in May 2025 and remain in detention there today. I saw detention conditions in South Sudan firsthand as a U.S. diplomat and can attest that no moral country would willfully condemn anyone to such a fate. To me, this is a clear case of when a civil servant should say no. If your job requires you to facilitate or negotiate these agreements and the renditions they cause, you should refuse and, if necessary, resign. This applies to the leadership and staff involved in executing these acts at U.S. embassies abroad, and for anyone else being told to implement immoral and illegal policies on this administration's behalf. I know this is a tall order. I made a similar decision to leave my government career during the first Trump administration, so I know what it means to do so. When Trump was elected in 2016, I knew his agenda would shape my work. I was a diplomat at Mogadishu, Somalia at the time. Trump had already maligned the people of that country while on the campaign trail, and his promise of a Muslim travel ban would hit Somalia too. I decided then to identify my red lines. What would I refuse to do? What would I quit my career for? I didn't want to unwittingly grow a tolerance for terrible acts. I decided that I would not break the law, I would not contribute to human rights abuses, or do anything that could undermine U.S. national security, and I would quit when I no longer felt I could do more good than harm in my position. We learned at Nuremberg that just following orders is no legal or moral defense. For everyone who espouses some measure of morality, there must be a red line that they will not cross, and anyone who works for this administration should know what theirs is.
As we talk so much about the Supreme Court, the next article says more key cases await the justices in the fall. The Supreme Court already has a slate of important cases lined up for its next term that begins in October on issues including guns, voting restrictions, LGBTQ rights, and a disputed detention policy used by President Trump's administration for certain convicted immigrants. There are cases due to be argued in the next term involving big corporations, and they include a bid by ExxonMobil and Suncor Energy to scuttle a climate-related lawsuit by officials in Boulder, Colorado, a dispute arising from an antitrust suit by Fortnite, the maker of Epic Games, against Apple, and a trademark case involving PepsiCo. The justices issued the final rulings in their last term, one dominated by cases involving Trump and his policies last Monday and Tuesday, and more Trump-related policies being litigated in lower courts promised to eventually reach them during their next term. So first of all, look at the Second Amendment. The court, which has a 6-3 conservative majority, has steadily moved American law rightward this decade. It has taken an expansive view of the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms and issued 2 more rulings last month widening gun rights. The gun case, coming in a next term, gives the justices an opportunity to strike down state restrictions on assault-style rifles such as AR-15s. They took up 2 appeals after lower courts upheld bans on such weapons in Connecticut and Cook County, Illinois, which includes Chicago. The court will have to grapple with not just whether the bans are consistent with historical U.S. regulations of firearms, but more fundamentally with whether these weapons even constitute arms within the meaning of the Second Amendment. Some appeals courts have held that they are not, as these semi-automatic weapons are ill-suited for self-defense and are predominantly useful only in military service. In voting rights, the court has an important voting rights case lined up for the next term. It will hear a GOP-led bid backed by the Trump administration to revive voter restrictions in Arizona that would stiffen proof of citizenship requirements for voter registrants and purge state voter rolls of alleged non-U.S. citizens. Democrats have accused Republicans of pursuing voter suppression measures as a bid to lower voter turnout and disenfranchising certain specific groups who traditionally have leaned towards the Democratic Party. Republicans have said their proposals are intended to protect election security. In the detention cases, the justice in the coming term will hear the Trump administration's appeal in a case involving the legality of subjecting certain convicted immigrants with pending deportation proceedings to lengthy detention without bond hearings that would allow them to seek a release on bail. A lower court ruled that the constitutional right to due process bars unreasonably prolonged detention without a hearing for non-U.S. citizens who face deportation after being convicted of certain rights. And finally, LGBTQ rights. Another LGBTQ-related case from Colorado comes before the court after the justices in March rejected the state's law that banned psychotherapists from using conversion talk therapy, intended to change an LGBTQ minors' sexual orientation or gender identity on free speech grounds. The justices will also hear a bid by the Archdiocese of Denver and other Catholic entities for exemption from a Colorado preschool funding program's non-discrimination requirement in the court's latest clash between religious rights and LGBTQ protections. A lower court found that the Colorado program did not violate the constitutional religious rights of the Catholic plaintiffs.
Well, in Washington news, the headline is Johnson, House will pass Trump's voter bill after a revolt in the GOP. House Speaker Mike Johnson said he plans to move quickly to advance President's signature voter ID legislation through the arduous budget reconciliation process once the House returns to Washington, downplaying the heightened tensions within the GOP after he sent lawmakers home early for the holidays after a few Republicans brought the floor to a halt. I just decided it was best to send everybody home to go celebrate 4th of July in their districts. We'll come back, gather everybody together, he told Fox News on Sunday. The big urgency is to get the Save America Act passed. The president has that as a top priority, and so do I. Last week, a small group of conservative hardliners, led by Representative Anna Paulina Luna of Florida, effectively blocked a key procedural vote to advance several bills on the floor out of protest that Congress had not sent the Save America Act to the president's desk. Driven by the frustration, Trump has already held up a critical intelligence nomination and declined to sign a major bipartisan housing package, despite Senate Republican leaders insisting they do not have the 60 votes needed to overcome the filibuster and proceed with the election's unusual bill. The president again made his demands for the legislation public during a late-night speech on Saturday, celebrating the 250th anniversary. America is back, and we want to keep America great, and we will do so by approving the Save America Act, he said to a crowd gathered on the National Mall, which included several Republican lawmakers.
Returning back to the front page, the city of Tonawanda has a message for parking ticket scofflaws. Pay up, or we're going to tow your vehicle. The city of Tonawanda is ready to give parking scofflaws a one-way ticket to the impound lot. City officials say they were seeing a rise in unpaid parking tickets, and they needed a new tool to prod vehicle owners to pay what they owe. Tonawanda leaders said city laws lacked meaningful consequences for motorists who didn't pay up. That's why the Tonawanda Common Council recently passed a regulation giving the city the right to impound vehicles that have 3 or more unpaid parking tickets tied to them. The new law applies in cases where police come across an illegally parked vehicle and find unpaid tickets in the search of city records. It's not something we're looking for, said Mayor Bill Strasberg in an interview. It's just a habitual violator who chooses not to pay the parking fine that they owe. Then there's a mechanism for the police to take action to make sure that those parking tickets do get paid. The Tonawanda City Clerk's office this week didn't immediately provide data on how many parking tickets had been issued but remain unpaid, nor how many vehicles have 3 or more outstanding parking tickets. So it's uncertain how many vehicles would face impounding under the new law. But city officials said they encountered some extreme examples, and Tonawanda had no way to force these scofflaws to pay for these violations. The Tonawanda Common Council held a public hearing on the proposed parking ticket ordinance on June 2nd. No member of the public spoke during the hearing. The council voted 5-0 to approve the new law at the same meeting. Under the new regulation, when city parking enforcement officers find an illegally parked vehicles, they'll check whether there are any unpaid tickets linked to the vehicle's license plate or registered owner. If there are 3 or more unpaid tickets, in addition to the latest violation, the towing company will be called to take the vehicle to an impound lot, officials said. The vehicle will not be released until the tickets, as well as any towing and impounding fees, are paid. Standard city parking tickets carry a $30 fine that doubles if not paid within 7 days. City officials said Tonawanda police won't seek out parking scofflaws and won't, for example, orderly order lawfully parked vehicles towed from their owners' driveways. If another parking violation comes up and it's discovered that this car has outstanding parking tickets already, then we'll take action. They're not going to go out looking for people, said Saltarelli, a city attorney. This isn't going to be some kind of witch hunt.
Well, the weather forecast for the coming week is cooler after the high temperatures we had last week, but it's summertime and we're still going to have some hot days ahead. And so our next article is headlined, Beat the Heat. Summer's here, temperatures are rising, and you're seeing the obligatory stories warning you about heat stroke and other dangers of high heat. So, how concerned should you be? Highly concerned, according to a variety of health sources. Children, older adults, and people with chronic medical conditions are most at risk, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says. Outdoor workers, homeless people, pregnant people, and others face high heat danger as well. And anyone can unexpectedly be overcome by extreme heat, sometimes in as little as 10 to 15 minutes. Part of the problem is what Yale researchers call the heat risk perception gap, in which people underestimate high heat hazards. You should start taking precautions when the heat index reaches the 90s, the National Weather Service says. At a heat index of 105 or higher, heat exhaustion is more likely. Heat stroke becomes possible with prolonged exposure or physical activity. It's a good idea to be aware of the places that can harbor heat hazards, and here are a few examples, some you'll recognize and some you may not. Here are places you don't want to be. First of all, in hot cars. Going shopping? Hot cars are probably the first heat danger people think of, but perhaps not enough. Nearly 40 children on average die in hot cars every year. Most of those children are 3 years old and younger. Most are left by parents or caregivers by accident, according to the organization Kids in Car Safety, which tracks such deaths. Hot car deaths can happen at any time of the year. Even if it doesn't feel unbearably hot outside, the inside of a car can rapidly heat up like a greenhouse. Attics. Cleaning out your attic? Temperatures up there can exceed 150 to 160 degrees in the summer, even when the outside temperature is 95 to 97 degrees, according to Texas A&M University Extension. That creates extreme risks of heat exhaustion and deadly heat stroke. Attics get hot because roofs are exposed to the sun for hours, radiating heat inside. Also, warm air from below rises to the attic, and many attics lack good ventilation. Confined spaces. Doing work around the house, areas such as crawl spaces, sump pump pits, utility cellars, and other underporch areas can be hotter than outside air, according to the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. These areas often have awkward entrances and lack ventilation, which allows heat to build quickly. Pavement. Taking Fido for a walk? Asphalt and dark pavement can become very hot to pets' feet, according to Ready.gov. Puppies are especially at risk. When the air temperature is 86 degrees, asphalt temperatures can reach 135 degrees, according to the Journal of American Medical Association. That can cause thermal burns upon contact with the skin. One way to tell if the ground or pavement is too hot for your dog is to walk on is to place your hand comfortably on the pavement for 10 seconds. If it's too hot for your hand, it's too hot for your dog's paws. And then finally, outdoor events. Going for a run or to an outdoor concert? Extreme heat becomes more dangerous when people are physically active, the CDC says. They can get dehydrated and overexposed to the sun and are unable to cool down. The CDC suggests scheduling outdoor activity carefully, drinking fluids, and seeking air conditioning as needed, and pacing yourself. Ready.gov advises people going outdoors during extreme heat to seek shade, stay hydrated, and avoid strenuous activity or outdoor work at midday.
Well, normally we have the death listings at this point, but as happened frequently in the last few weeks, we have no obituaries and no death notices, so we're going to move right on to the horoscopes. If today is your birthday, Monday, July 6th, you are charismatic and vibrantly optimistic. Your enthusiasm is infectious. This is a year of exciting changes and increased personal freedom. Stay flexible and let go of whatever impedes your growth. Seek out new opportunities and be ready to act fast. Trust your intuition and expect to travel. And Ed, today's our daughter's birthday, and that describes her very, very well.
Well, happy birthday to her.
Thank you, Krista. The stars tell us what kind of day we'll have. 5 dynamic, 4 positive, 3 average, and 2 so-so, 1 difficult. And all of ours are 3 and 4s today, so that's pretty good. Aries, 4 stars. Don't let an element of dreamy confusion get you sidetracked today, because this is possible. Tonight, you win. Taurus, 3 stars. This is a restless day for you. Something going on behind the scenes might put you on edge. Nevertheless, this is a great day to research something. Tonight, enjoy solitude. Gemini, 4 stars. A friend might surprise you today, or you might meet someone unusual. Don't let someone else rain on your parade or throw shade on you. Tonight, schmooze. Cancer, 3 stars. This is a poor day to ask for permission or approval from authority figures, because cooperation is not easy to get today. Tonight, you're admired. Leo, 4 stars. An unexpected opportunity to travel might drop in your lap today, or perhaps travel plans will suddenly change. Tonight, explore and learn. Virgo, 3 stars. Make friends with your bank account, because something unexpected could impact banking details, assets, or anything to do with shared property. Stay on top of things. Tonight, check your finances. Libra, 3 stars. Today you have to accommodate someone or go more than halfway to meet them, as it were. Furthermore, relations with partners, spouses, and authority figures might be strained. Tonight, cooperate. Scorpio, 3 stars. Your work routine will be interrupted today. Don't get cowed by the criticism of authority figures. Tonight, get better organized. Sagittarius, 4 stars. Be patient with partners and close friends, because fiery Mars opposite your sign can make you easily irritated with others. Tonight, relax at home and socialize. Capricorn, 3 stars. Take a mellow approach when dealing with partners and close friends today, because relationships can be strained, especially due to criticism. Tonight, relax. Aquarius, 4 stars. Steer clear of authority figures at work today, because you might be criticized or become discouraged for some reason. Instead, act on impulsive plans to do something fun and different. Tonight, discussions. And finally, Pisces, 3 stars. Today, your focus is on finances and money matters. Very likely, you might impulsively purchase something. Tonight, check your possessions.
Well, now looking back at this date in history, in 1854, disgruntled over the issue of slavery, voters formed a viable new political party to challenge Democrats, the Republican Party of the United States. In 1885, together with Dr. Jacques-Joseph Grancher, Louis Pasteur inoculated 9-year-old Joseph Meister with the first successful rabies vaccine. Meister, who had been bitten by a rabid dog, survived for 10 days of treatment. In 1900, Warren Earp, the younger brother of the infamous Earp clan, was killed in Wilcox, Arizona. In 1928, Lights of New York, the first all-talking full-length motion picture, premiered at the Strand Theater in New York City. It had a running time of 57 minutes. In 1942, Anne Frank and her family went into hiding in Amsterdam to escape persecution by the Nazis. They lived in a concealed room behind a bookcase at the building in which her father, Otto Frank, used to work, and documented her life during their 2 years living in the annex in a journal, which would be published as The Diary of a Young Girl. In 1944, a fire broke out under a circus big top of the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus in Hartford, Connecticut, killing 167 and injuring more than 700 people. It was the biggest disaster in Connecticut and one of the worst fires in U.S. history. In 1956, Major League Baseball Commissioner Ford Frick inaugurated the Cy Young Award to honor baseball's outstanding pitcher of the season, and in 1957, John Lennon, age 16, and Paul McCartney, age 15, met for the first time as Lennon's rock group The Quarrymen performed at St. Peter's Woolton Parish Church in Liverpool. Mutual friend Ivan Vaughn introduced them.
And then we have a couple of news briefs. 4 children were among July 4th gunshot victims. At least 8 people, including 4 children, were shot and injured late on the U.S. Independence Day holiday in New York City's Coney Island neighborhood, ABC News reported on Sunday. The injured included 2 men, 2 women, and 4 children ages 14, 12, 7, and 6. It quoted the New York Police Department as saying all the victims had been transported to hospitals, 7 were in stable condition, and the 21-year-old woman was in critical condition. In the Arabian Sea, the U.S. Navy said Sunday it suspended its search for a sailor who was reported missing on Wednesday. The Navy's 5th Fleet said the Navy and Air Force searched for a sailor who was reported missing and went down in the Arabian Sea. His name is being withheld at least 24 hours to allow them to notify the next of kin. In the oil output, OPEC Plus agreed to a further increase in output targeting for August. The group said on Sunday that it will add to the global supply when prices are falling for oil to gradually reopen the Strait of Hormuz for oil exports. The oil producing group agreed during the online meeting to increase quotas by 188,000 barrels per day for August, on top of similar increases for June and July.
You're listening to a reading of articles from the Buffalo News for Monday, July 6th, on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. We'll return for more readings after this short break. Your readers today are
Ted Pyjak
and Ed Howard.
If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you.
We'll continue now with our reading of articles from today's Buffalo News. Your readers are
Ted Pajacki.
and I'm Ed Howard, and we turn now to the city and regional section of the paper. And our first story is headlined, Ryan's Lobby Firm Switch Under Fire. For many years, the city has been using the lobbying firm of former Mayor Anthony Masiello to work on issues in the state capitol. But during the transition to Mayor Sean Ryan's administration, that changed. In November, as part of the transition process from former Mayor Christopher Scanlon's administration, the city changed to a new firm at Ryan's request, signing a new contract with Brown and Weinraub, one of the most influential and well-regarded lobbying firms in Albany. But some Common Council members are questioning whether that move skirted procurement rules and whether the city continues to need an outside lobbying firm after the Ryan administration hired a full-time government relations specialist who lives in Albany to work on pursuing Buffalo's interests in the state capitol. Deputy Mayor Benjamin Swanekamp said the city's decision to change firms was related to the need to get as much financial help from the state as possible as the city works to achieve financial stability. And he praised the work of Martucci Masiello Hughes Culpa, which previously held the same contract, a $60,000 per year retainer. But he said the city needed a firm with deep connections and acute knowledge of the budget process to give it the best chance at closing the deficit as quickly as possible. In the months that Brown and Weinraub spent lobbying state officials during the budget process, the firm was able to pay dividends for the city, he added. Included in the state budget was a $65 million boost in state aid over last year, including $30 million to help the city close the fiscal year that just ended, and an additional $25 million that helped to cushion an already hefty tax levy hike in the new budget. We, during the transition, identified that additional financial aid from Albany would be critical to achieving a soft landing, Swanekamp said, and while doing so, we knew we were going to have to do a serious tax levy increase, trying to keep it as under control as possible. Ryan proposed a 25% tax levy increase in his recommended budget, a number that dropped to 19% after negotiations with Common Council and some higher than anticipated revenue streams projected for the current fiscal year. Swanekamp said the administration identified Brown and Weinraub as the best option because of the deep connections the law firm has to the governor's office and state legislature. That includes former state government staffers on their team, including people who worked in lofty positions at the State Department of Budget. They have the people who had very, very high-level access to the offices that we needed to get in front of to make our case for Buffalo, Swanekamp said. Swanekamp said that former Deputy Mayor Brian Gould was helpful during the transition process and executed the new contract with Brown Weinraub at the request of the incoming administration so that they could get a head start on their effort to convince state lawmakers to provide more aid in helping to right the city's deficit issues. And through the city's law department, the city was able to directly contract with the lobbying firm. The Corporation Counsel's office is not required to engage in a request for proposals process or go before the Common Council for approval when contracting with other law firms, Swanekamp said. Gould, in a phone interview, confirmed that he executed the contract at the request of the Ryan team, trying to be as helpful as he could to the new administration during the process. Council Majority Leader Leah Halton Pope pointed to language in the city charter that she says requires a contract for lobbying services to receive a majority vote to go into effect. No administration in the history of the city of Buffalo should hire a lobbyist to speak for the city of Buffalo and Albany without the Common Council knowing exactly what positions that firm is being paid to advance, Halton Pope said. And others said that even the procurement through the Corporation Council office is permissible, the administration still should have brought it before the council for discussion in the interest of transparency.
And now we have a sad story. 3 dead and 15 wounded in a violent weekend in western New York. In a violent weekend across western New York, 3 people were killed and 15 were shot in Buffalo and Niagara Falls. Police departments in the 2 cities confirmed that Saturday night into Sunday morning, gun violence surged, leaving 2 people dead in Niagara Falls in separate incidents. At the same time, people were celebrating the Independence Day holiday. Buffalo police confirmed that 12 people were shot in the city in 6 separate incidents, but offered few other details in a news release that was distributed on Sunday. All victims are suffering what appear to be non-life-threatening injuries, according to the release by the Buffalo Police. One of the deaths, Saturday, occurred in the Erie County Holding Center downtown. The Sheriff's Office personnel were called at 11:11 a.m. on Saturday after an incarcerated man was found unresponsive in his cell. Jail staff, Buffalo Fire Department staff, and emergency medical technicians administered medical care in an attempt to save his life, but the man was pronounced dead at 11:54, according to a news release from the Sheriff's Office. The case is being investigated as a homicide, and potential suspects have been identified. A later release from the Sheriff's Office identified the dead man as Antonio Pizarro, 27 years old. Pizarro entered Sheriff's Office custody on June 30th on a parole warrant. The offices of the Erie County District Attorney and the State Attorney General have both been notified. The Niagara Falls Police Department, in a news release, said officers first responded to a call of a large gathering around 1 a.m. in the area of Fairfield and Highland Avenues. After arriving, they began dispersing the crowd. During that time, they were told someone had been shot and driven in a personal vehicle to Niagara Falls Memorial Medical Center. That person later died in the hospital. Then around 3 a.m., officers responded to a call for another large party and shots fired on the 3000 block of Niagara Street. Officers encountered a large, uncooperative crowd, and along with the other first responders, began to administer medical care to a person in an alley behind a building who had been shot, according to the release. Coinciding with this incident, the Niagara Falls Police Department was advised a mail party had also arrived at the Niagara Falls Memorial Medical Center emergency room with a gunshot wound by private vehicle. This victim was treated at the hospital and released shortly thereafter, the release said. Names of the victims have not yet been released pending notification of victims' families. Niagara Falls Police are asking anyone with information on either incident to call the Criminal Investigation Division at 716-286-4553 or the General Information Line at 716-286-4711. Buffalo Police also responded to a call for a man on top of an Ohio Street grain elevator with a gun. SWAT and crisis management teams were dispatched to the scene, where they remained for 8 hours, according to the written statement, though no details were provided on how that incident ended. Buffalo Police said in a release that Commissioner Erica Shields would hold a press conference on Monday to answer questions about these many weekend shootings. The city of Buffalo has seen a sharp decrease in both shootings and homicides since the significant spikes that happened during the COVID-19 restrictions and other disruption of life caused by the pandemic, part of a trend across the country. However, Buffalo has seen a rash of violence during the first half of the year, which has continued throughout June and now into July. Shooting incidents through May were up 9%, and shooting victims were up 11% over last year. Shields described these developments as alarming at a late May press conference regarding a police officer who was shot 6 times after responding to a domestic violence call. Fellow officers shot the man who was accused of shooting the officer in that incident, and both survived their injuries.
Well, Ted, the future is here. A robot powered by artificial intelligence is going to make its debut in Salamanca schools. The idea of students learning from intelligent robots instead of teachers has long been a staple of futuristic science fiction. In Salamanca, the future is now. Realbotics Corporation, a developer of humanoid robots and AI systems, is partnering with the Salamanca City School District for its pilot program to launch Optio, an AI teaching assistant initiative. The robot, which has been named Sally, is programmed with district curriculum and aims to assist with concept reinforcement, individual tutoring, and 24/7 homework support. It won't be as chatty or mobile as C-3PO of Star Wars fame, but it will offer what its inventors hope is a glimpse of how technology can help reach more students, including at-risk youth who might otherwise fall behind at school. We're sort of preparing students for some of the things that are very relevant for the future. Today's educational system has evolved, but it was largely designed over 100 years ago, and the world has changed. Realbotics CEO Andrew Kigel said, Sally can communicate in more than 100 languages, make facial expressions, and move its limbs. An online AI Sally avatar will be available to students at all times, accessible through a login-protected website. The school district hopes to deploy Sally by the middle of this month, according to Superintendent Mark Beeler. The robot will assist with Salamanca's summer program and various STEM, that is, science, technology, engineering, and math camps. In September, the district is expected to expand the robot's availability to around 500 high school students. Beeler said one of the challenges of integrating AI into the classroom is that the technology is designed to let people take shortcuts, but students still need to learn how to do the thinking required for schoolwork on their own. It's designed to give you answers and make things in life simpler and faster, gaining information, solving problems, but that is sort of the opposite of what we want to do in school, which is teach students how to solve problems, how to get correct information. So we have been working with Realbotics to dial back many of those particular features and turn it into more of a teaching tool, he said. The opportunity for individualized tutoring is one of the robot's main advantages. Students who are unable to afford a human tutor, students who are not proficient in English, and students who have special needs are examples of who may benefit the most, according to Kigel. It's equalizing the delivery of education to students because, hey, not every parent can afford a tutor at $50 an hour or whatever they charge. This provides similar benefit to having a tutor, but it's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whenever the student needs it, Kigel said. This allows us to not just address weaknesses in kids to keep them within their grade, but also helps kids who are gifted to accelerate beyond what they may be getting. Salamanca's humanoid robot differs from the typical Realbotics product in compliance with state requirements. The robot will not use facial recognition technology. It will also be programmed specifically for Salamanca's curriculum to prevent misinformation and biased information from slipping in, according to Beeler. We are very sensitive to data privacy, so all the rules that are in place right now for any of the software applications are being followed with Realbotics. For example, the humanoid itself is not actually connected to the internet, Beeler said. It has essentially sort of its own brain, and what it knows is what we've told it. It has guardrails of topics that it can't talk about, and if students try to venture that way, it will redirect them onto the teaching and learning that should be occurring. The appearance of the robot is yet to be revealed, but it will stand 5 feet 8 inches tall. Realbotics is collaborating with Salamanca to determine other characteristics such as hair, skin, and eye color. Both Kigel and Beeler insist that the robot is supposed to assist teachers with their jobs, not replace them.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier radio reading service, and the time is 15 minutes after the hour. And now we turn to the sports section, and of course tonight's the big World Cup game for America. And the headline of this article is, "Home is where the heart is for the USA." A different kind of Monday Night Football comes to Seattle when the U.S. faces Belgium for a place in the World Cup quarterfinals, with an American side carrying rising expectations into a meeting with one of Europe's most experienced teams. The match against Belgium at the Seattle Seahawks home stadium, one of the loudest venues in the National Football League, is expected to provide a raucous background for a U.S. team whose tournament ambitions have grown with each performance. Before the World Cup, many U.S. supporters viewed a place in the final 16 as a reasonable target. However, wins over Paraguay and Australia in the group stage, followed by a 2-0 victory over Bosnia despite playing the final 36 minutes with only 10 men, have raised the hopes that Mauricio Pochettino's side can make a deeper run on home soil. Okay, this thing likes to jump around today. The U.S. team celebrated the country's 250th anniversary in time-honored fashion by watching fireworks with family and friends after a relaxed training session on Saturday morning. Weston McKennie and Folarin Balogun who was suspended after a straight red in the win over Bosnia and Herzegovina, tossed a baseball around, and coach Mauricio Pochettino wished reporters a happy holiday before the players got to work. The U.S. had another reason to celebrate Sunday when it was announced that Balogun will be available for the World Cup's last 16 clash tonight. Balogun scored his third goal of the World Cup in the 2-0 win, but was shown a red card in the second half for planting his boot into the ankle of Bosnia's Tariq Mihailovic, leaving the U.S. to navigate the remainder of the game being a man down. The implementation of the match suspension is suspended for a probationary period of 1 year, FIFA said in a statement. If Folarin Balogun commits another infringement of a similar nature and gravity during the probationary period, the suspension shall be revoked and the sanction enforced without prejudice to any additional sanction imposed for the new infringement. The judicial body has the discretion to fully or partially suspend the implementation of a disciplinary sanction. Thank you to the FIFA for doing what was right and reversing a great injustice, U.S. President Donald Trump wrote on Truth Social. U.S. Soccer accepted the decision. We are pleased that Folarin Balogun is eligible to compete tomorrow, it said in its statement yesterday, after Belgium's Football Federation released a lengthy statement decrying FIFA's decision, which concluded with a promise to investigate all potential options. National team coach Rudy Garcia said at a press conference that the integrity of the game was top of mind. I didn't know that at a FIFA World Cup, the 5th of July is now April, and it's April Fool's Day. This is news to me, Garcia said via translation. Balogun's teammates said they only found out via social media on their way to training. We found about it just coming over here, American forward Christian Pulisic told reporters. At first, you're like, is this real? And then, oh, this is great news. The U.S. squad attended Friday night's Seattle Mariners baseball game, and midfielder Christian Roldan whipped up the crowd with the cry of Let's go win a World Cup, reflecting the co-host's increasing confidence. At the moment, maybe yes, someone told reporters. Hopefully we will win the game, and then we can play even more games in the tournament, because we have an amazing group at this moment. We play very well, and we're very motivated, and the country believes, everybody believes at this moment, the support is huge. We're not fully thinking about it at the minute. We're thinking about playing games and putting in performances. But we are very aware of the impact that we're having around the country and the impact that we're having on generations of people and fans.
Well, Ted, it's only 10 days till training camp starts at St. John Fisher, and in Lance Lasowski's column today, he says that the Bills are counting on recent additions to beef up the defensive backfield. He says, after 2 seasons as one of the youngest players in the Buffalo Bills secondary, Cole Bishop will enter training camp later this month as one of the more well-known voices in their locker room. It's really good for him because he's always been the young guy, but now he's the guy that's actually the only one who's been here in the starting role, noted first-year coach Joe Brady. A breakthrough in 2025 erased any questions about Bishop's ability to make plays for the Bills. On the field for all 19 of Buffalo's regular season and playoff games, Bishop totaled 99 tackles with 4 interceptions and 8 passes defended. He excelled despite former coach Sean McDermott relying on a rotation at the other safety spot. Replenishing the depth at safety was a priority this offseason for General Manager and President of Football Operations Brandon Beane. First, he signed C.J. Gardner-Johnson, a Super Bowl champion who's on his 5th team in 9 seasons. Gardner-Johnson's intensity can be a strength and a weakness. After vetting the player through contacts who worked with him in New Orleans, the Bills signed Gardner-Johnson to be a 1-year contract. And though he enters training camp as the projected starter next to Bishop, the Bills may also use Gardner-Johnson at nickel cornerback. Next, the Bills added veteran Geno Stone, who has experience playing in defenses like the one new coordinator Jim Leonhard is building. Stone started 45 games over the past 3 seasons, totaling a career-high 7 interceptions for the Baltimore Ravens in 2023. In addition to protecting themselves against injuries, the Bills gave Leonhard the pieces to use more plays with 6 defensive backs on the field. The plan will falter, however, if the new safeties do not gel with Bishop or if he takes a step back in year 3. Whether he's able to continue to improve in a new defense is among the prominent questions facing the team entering training camp. The versatility that he has, he's kind of a jack of all trades, Leonhard said of Bishop. He's physical, he can play in space, he can cover. His kind is the type of safety I've tried to be myself. I definitely gravitated to his game when he was getting out of college. There were certain things he didn't do well at the college level that I felt like there was going to be a little bit of a process for him to really flourish in the NFL. It was kind of awesome to see him go from year 1 to year 2, and you're starting to see those flashes show up more and more as I expected through the evolution process. Now it's just trying to find opportunities for him to continue to grow. The Bills' secondary will be more tested more often in 2026 if Leonhard is successful in his efforts to fix the run defense. Bishop will continue to be used as a middle fielder free safety and near the line of scrimmage, but he'll also need to learn how to play next to the other half of Buffalo's tandem. Gardner-Johnson's presence will help. Communication will not be an issue when Gardner-Johnson is on the field. Bills superstar quarterback Josh Allen noted during mandatory minicamp last month that Gardner-Johnson was typically the loudest player on defense before each snap. If Gardner-Johnson harnesses his intense nature properly, he's an above-average starter. In 2022 and 2024, he totaled 6 interceptions for the Eagles. After falling out of favor in Philadelphia and Houston, Gardner-Johnson excelled in Chicago. He played 87% of the defensive snaps during the 10 regular season games in which he appeared for the Bears last season. Gardner-Johnson possesses an upside that some of the Buffalo's other recent safeties have lacked. For example, last season, Jordan Poyer was taken off the field on most third downs because age had impacted his ability to cover in space.
Well, Ed, kind of mirroring the World Cup, our sports section is all over the world. And we go over to England now for Wimbledon, and the headline is Pegula rallies to continue major run. Eva Jovic is regarded as the leader of a new generation in American women's tennis. But on Sunday at Wimbledon, she was handed a reality check by compatriot Jessica Pegula, who's from Buffalo, who used all of her expertise to cut the teenager down to size on court 1. The 32-year-old Pegula said beforehand that she expected the 18-year-old Jovic to come at her hard, and so it proved. But after a scrappy first set, she won 4-6, 6-3, 6-1 to reach the quarterfinal and equal her best Wimbledon run. The opener featured 7 service breaks, with Pegula describing her action like a ping-pong match. But once she settled, she stamped her authority on the match. I'm happy with the way I was able to kind of readjust and not panic too much and just reset, said Pegula, the 4th seed, who is a Buffalo native. I wasn't serving well, so I ended up losing the set, and that's not how I was going to win the match. I just told myself to pick up the first serve percentage, get some more first serve free points, quick points. Jovic was trying to reach her second Grand Slam quarterfinal, having done so at this year's Australian Open, and looked on course to do that before Pegula dug her heels in. Serving with more authority and cutting out the unforced errors, Pegula won 4 games in a row after losing the first game of the second set and did not look back. Jovic, the 16th seed, began to look dispirited in the third set as Pegula moved quickly toward the finish. Pegula, one of 5 American women to reach the last 16 for the first time since 2002, will face another compatriot in the last 8 after Coco Gauff reached her first Wimbledon quarterfinal by beating Switzerland's Belinda Bencic 4-6, 6-3, and 6-4 on Sunday. Like Madison Keys on Saturday, Pegula hopes that match could see her tick off a first appearance on center court, having graced all other biggest Grand Slam arenas. It would be really cool, an honor, obviously, she said, if I get there. By making a semifinal would be awesome. I would love to earn my spot to be there.
Well, some baseball news, and the headline here is Kurtz is heading to the All-Star game. The A's first baseman takes Vladimir Guerrero's spot on the American League roster. Athletics first baseman Nick Kurtz will start the All-Star game at first base for the American League, replacing Vladimir Guerrero Jr. of the Toronto Blue Jays. Guerrero had been voted in as the starter by fans, but is opting to let his ailing back heal as opposed to participating in the game. Kurtz, the reigning American League Rookie of the Year, received the most votes among American League first basemen on the player ballot and will move into the starting role. Guerrero has dealt with periodic back issues, and he missed consecutive games against the New York Yankees in mid-June when the ailment flared up. He also sat out last Tuesday's game against the New York Mets due to his back. It's very difficult for me, but I really have to take care of myself, and I've got to put my team first for the second half, Guerrero said. This was his 6th consecutive All-Star selection. Guerrero, age 27, is having a sluggish offensive season, batting .265 with just 4 home runs and 35 RBIs in 82 games. He's hit 23 or more home runs in 5 consecutive seasons, including a Major League Baseball leading 48 in 2021. Kurtz, who's 23, is hitting .278 with 20 home runs and 66 RBIs in 88 games, and the All-Star game is set for July 14th in Philadelphia. And thanks to Yordan Alvarez's walk-off home run on Saturday, the Houston Astros have now won 9 straight games on July 4th, which is the longest streak on Independence Day since the Chicago White Sox won 14 in a row from 1934 through 1941.
You are listening to a reading of today's Buffalo News on your Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The time is 30 minutes after the hour. And now we turn to our advice column of Asking Eric. And the headline is, Brother Doesn't Want Gay Father's Ex at the Memorial. Dear Eric, my 93-year-old dad passed away recently, and my brother and I are planning a memorial service. Our mother died several years ago. Mom and Dad stayed married despite the fact that Dad came out as gay around 2000. He had a very close relationship with a man, Douglas, for many years, although they were just friends when Dad died. My brother and I, and my mother, were aware of Dad's being gay and his relationship with Douglas, but the rest of our family was not. Many of Dad's friends know Douglas. My brother does not want Douglas invited to Dad's memorial, even by Zoom. I don't think my brother is homophobic. I just think he never wanted to process this issue. He says that having Douglas there means he would have to explain to his wife and adult children this side of our father's story, and he doesn't want to do that. I think that excluding Douglas would be cruel. He's deeply grieving, and he would most likely go unnoticed and unremarked at the memorial. He would also probably attend by Zoom. But I don't think I have a greater right than my brother to dictate who comes to the memorial service, and I don't want to create a situation that is painful for my brother. Preserving my relationship with my brother after my father's death is very important to me. Can you help me find a way through this? And it's signed, Grieving Sister and Daughter. And Eric's reply is, Dear Sister and Daughter, I'm sorry for the loss of your father. Your impulse surrounding Douglas's presence at the memorial service is correct and kind. You should follow it. You don't need to be the person to debate this with your brother, of course. But you might ask him to apply some logic or simply release control of the situation. Since Douglas is known to many of your father's friends, it's likely that any of them could tell him about the memorial and even send the Zoom link to him. Unless you're stipulating that this is a strictly private affair, it's unusually to control who comes and who doesn't. Additionally, it's usual for a relative to have to explain who every person at the memorial is, even in small gatherings. Our lives are full. Ideally, after 93 years, a person crosses paths with an untold number of people in multiple different contexts. If your brother's wife asks who a random square on a Zoom screen is, your brother doesn't have to give details or even claim to know him. Encourage your brother to release the situation. Actively working against Douglas will only hurt Douglas, and it will do nothing to remedy your brother's grief. Encourage him to live and let live. It will help him focus on what's most important to him, and that's remembering his father. Next letter. Dear Eric, I and 2 others work in a very small office in our local landfill. We are never together. Each of us has an assigned day. One of our coworkers seems to be a hoarder. She has furniture, hideous, and other treasures squirreled away in our office. I do not want to hurt her feelings by calling out her behavior. I asked her recently to take some items home, and she replied her car was already full. We get along fine other than this issue. How can we kindly, tactfully speak to her about this? And it's signed, Cramped Coworker. Eric's reply, Dear Coworker, as this is a shared space, it would benefit from shared agreements about its use. Right now, It seems that she's presuming the space is hers to do with as she pleases, without regard for how it impacts the other two people who work there. So start with laying down some ground rules everyone can agree to. Since you're never together, this may take a little logistical work on your end. You might, for instance, reach out to a third coworker and start the ball rolling. Then present your hoarding coworker with the thoughts and ask for her feedback. Ideally, this will get you to a place where you can remind her when she's not following the group agreement. That is, we agree to keep this desk clean when it's not our shift, etc. Although she might take things personally, it's best for you to keep the focus on yourself and what you need to do the job well. So for instance, you might explain, the other coworker and I have trouble navigating the office when there are extra things stored in it. It's a safety hazard. So can we agree to keep the walkways clear? This can have a different impact than telling her, your things are blocking my path. Remind her that her choices in the shared space affect other people, and she may be compelled to make some kind of change.
Well, back to local news. The Amherst Jewish Center is set to grow. The Center for Jewish Life has outgrown its space, and now it plans to more than double in size. When the Center for Jewish Life opened its doors in 2000, it did so in a 4,000 square foot single-story building on Hopkins Road in Amherst that was originally approved and constructed in 1997 as a medical building. Its leaders had no idea at the time that its home would someday be nowhere near what was needed to fulfill the center's mission. We could never have imagined how many lives would be touched within its walls, said one of its leaders. Rabbi Lazer Lebkovsky wrote in an email, "Today, Center for Jewish Life is alive with activity." But now, the Jewish religious organization will get an opportunity to more than double in size after winning municipal approval from the town of Amherst for a major expansion. Affiliated with the Hasidic Chabad Lubavitch movement of the ultra-Orthodox Judaism, the Center for Jewish Life is an outreach organization that seeks to encourage Jews to be more observant. Led by Lazer Lebkovsky and his wife Chiani, the center runs Shabbat religious services, holiday celebrations, educational classes and programs, a daycare, an afternoon school, and a kosher Meals on Wheels program. "We have outgrown our space," Lebkovsky said. "It's time to give every program a permanent home of its own, a place where kosher Meals on Wheels no longer competes for space with Early Childhood Center, where a Torah class and a teen barbecue can happen at the same time without one having to be postponed for the other." The organization received Town Planning Board approval in late June for a 9,714 square foot two-story expansion that entails construction of an addition to the rear and north side of the existing building, will boast a first floor and a basement section of 4,850 square feet in each. According to designs by the Metzger Civil Engineering and Sutton Architecture, the first floor addition would contain a social hall and sanctuary, which will not be used simultaneously. The sanctuary would hold services while food would be served in the assembly hall afterwards. The two uses are currently combined in one multipurpose room. Those programs, each one of them, have continued to expand over the years, and we don't have the room to accommodate them properly, project attorney Jeffrey Palumbo said. The proposed expansion will allow each of these programs to have their own space, which they don't have right now. A small entry vestibule has also been added to the plan for security. The basement would hold classrooms, a mikveh ritual bath, mechanicals, and additional space for storage and other purposes related to other outreach programs. A walkout entrance will be added on the north side of the basement. The half-acre site has 22 parking spaces, which will remain, as officials noted that many of the center's patrons often walk there, especially on Shabbat and holidays. Additional improvements include sidewalks for easier pedestrian access, as well as landscaping, but no changes to utilities. As part of the project, The Center for Jewish Life has agreed to acquire 5 feet of land from a dental office property just to the north in order to meet setback requirements and provide the walkways. The project received necessary zoning approvals in March of 2024, but was under planning review for several months. The approval followed a public hearing in which several people spoke, both for and against the project, which still requires building permits. Jim Joyce, who owns an accounting and financial planning firm just to the south along Hopkins, objected to Center for Jewish Life patrons parking in his firm's lot. He asked for a fence on the south side of the parking. Lebowski, in an interview, said that CGL would put a stop to the parking problem, clean up the property, and repair or replace a fence.
Well, as we just celebrated our historic 250th birthday of America, we continue with an article about U.S. history. And the headline of this article is Drawn by Promise, and it's about the boom and bust of California's gold rush that reshaped the nation. He picked up a pebble from the riverbed, set it on a rock, and struck it with another. The metal flattened instead of shattering. At that moment, on January 24th, 1848, James W. Marshall knew what he held: gold. Within minutes, the carpenter and sawmill foreman gathered more glittering flakes along the American River, filling his hat with what later would be estimated was about $15 worth. Modest even then, but enough to change everything. The men working beside him, earning $1 a day in meals, quickly walked off the job in search of their own fortunes. Marshall's discovery at Sutter's Mill set off the California Gold Rush, a turning point not just for the West, but for a young nation still defining its identity. As the United States celebrates its 250th anniversary, the Gold Rush stands as one of the earliest and most consequential tests of the American promise: opportunity, mobility, and its costs. The story is often told as a celebration of ingenuity and risk-taking, qualities still central to the American identity. Yet the legacy is more complicated. The same forces that built fortunes also deepened inequality, accelerated environmental damage, and led to violence and exclusion that reshaped entire communities. Days after Marshall's find, the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo ended the Mexican-American War and transferred California to U.S. control. One of the largest mass migrations in American history followed. In 1848, California's non-native population was about 14,000. Within 4 years, it surged to 250,000. The so-called 49ers came by land and sea, some crossing the continent by wagons, others sailing around the Cape Horn or cutting through the Panama. San Francisco was transformed from a quiet port to a chaotic boomtown packed with tents, saloons, stores, and speculation. Here we go. Sacramento became a critical supply hub. New communities rose as quickly as fortunes were made and lost. At its peak in 1852, miners pulled tens of millions of dollars in gold from California's rivers and hills, wealth that fueled banks, railroads, and businesses nationwide. The economy just exploded, said Ed Allen, a historian at Marshall Gold Discovery State Historic Park. For those who came, the promise of instant wealth proved elusive. Only a small percentage of miners struck it rich. Many spent what little they had found just as quickly, a pattern fueled by scarcity, isolation, and the cost of supplies. Some of the most reliable profits went not to miners, but those who sold goods and services to them. Companies such as Wells Fargo and Levi Strauss traced their roots to that area, providing banking, shipping, and durable clothing built for the rough conditions of the gold country. The journey west itself was more than dangerous than mining. Travelers faced disease, starvation, and harsh terrain. Even after arrival, competition was fierce, claims were unstable, and violence was common. Nearly 2 centuries later, California remains a global magnet for those seeking opportunity, though the tools have changed. Instead of pans and shovels, today's seekers arrive with degrees, capital, and code. Silicon Valley, home to companies such as Apple, DaVita, Google, and Meta, became the center of another modern rush driven by artificial intelligence and the promise of transformative wealth. Venture capital, startups, and new technologies created cycles of boom and bust, but the underlying draw remains the same. California as a proving ground for ambition. Like the miners of 1849, today's innovators come from around the world.
Well, here's something new under the sun. The headline is keeping it simple. Slate's $25,000 electric pickup truck will shake up the auto industry. It's a real truck. That was my first thought as a $24,950 2027 Slate electric pickup accelerated down Figueroa Street on a recent Los Angeles morning. I didn't realize just how skeptical I'd been of Slate's do-it-yourself EV until that moment. Pieces didn't fall off, the wind didn't whistle through gaps in the bodywork, and bumps didn't rattle my teeth and twist my spine. It's a real truck, and attention must be paid. The startup success is by no means assured, but you can bet established automakers will be among Slate's first customers. How do they do it? What did we miss? Can we copy? Is this trouble? Here's the big news. Slate announced at its new design studios in Gardena, California, a pickup with a base price of $24,950, a range of 205 miles, 181 horsepower, charging time 4 hours at 240 volts, in as little as 30 minutes at a DC fasting charging station, and more than 100 exterior colors available from launch. Slate's website is taking orders, and delivery should begin in the fourth quarter. Mass customization is Slate's superpower, CEO Peter Farrisee told me at the company's headquarters in the Detroit suburb of Troy. I saw about a dozen pickups and SUVs in California. No two looked the same, and they were flanked by walls displaying dozens of parts owners can use to make their truck unique. The number of possible combinations is already in the hundreds of thousands, on its way to infinity. Slate may eventually offer one-of-a-kind exteriors with wraps in colors and patterns that customers create. Slate expects the average owner to spend about $5,000 on wraps and accessories. A tricked out, in the company's words, SUV on display, stickered it around $35,000 and included a square-back SUV roof, a 31-inch tall all-terrain tires, a tablet holder, window cranks, and HVAC vents in accent colors. Owners can do the work themselves or go to a nationwide network of authorized repair shops. Slate builds relatively simple vehicles and offers parts for customization by owners or repair shops. The vehicle's body panels are plastic, its structure a conventional steel frame and suspension. Slate makes 200 accessories, everything from rear seats, roofs, and roll bars that transform the pickup to an SUV, to 8 colors of interior trim panels that owners can slop at will. An AI generator produced a hypothetical example based on keywords from my last vacation: New Orleans, music, and dogs, and honestly, it was adorable, mostly in New Orleans signature purple, adorned with musical symbols and paw prints. For all of its thought-provoking potential, Slate also shares 1,000 mundane challenges with established automakers. Will its vehicles start every time? Will the charging system work? Will it squeak, whether due to issues at the factory or because the owners didn't install the parts right? Time will tell, but Slate's $25,000 EV is a real truck, less an entry-level vehicle than a fashion statement, holiday decoration, and parade float.
Sounds interesting. Next, we go back to the opinion page, and this is the My View column for today. And this was written by Craig P. Scarupa, who loves his pets, and apparently they love him back. And the headline is, "Pets are worth every penny they cost." My wife and I have had some great pets in our lifetime. Dogs are at the top of the list. We have owned 3 Boston Terriers, known as the American Gentleman, and the first type of dog bred in the United States. These are great family dogs, good with kids, very well behaved, and a joy to have around. Boomer, Bean, and Baxter have all been part of our family. Boomer and Bean are now gone to that great park in the sky. Baxter, who is still with us, is an incredible dog. If we leave him for a short period of time, say just 2 or 3 hours, when we do meet again, he acts as if we've not seen him in decades. This extremely affectionate dog brings an amazing amount of joy to our lives. Dogs are spectacular creatures. We also have a dozen or so fish in the backyard pond with some koi and some goldfish, and the grandkids love them. The birds, squirrels, raccoons, foxes, coyotes, and deer who visit the backyard are interesting to watch as well. The 10 to 30 deer who appear without fail every morning have become quite tame. They say in your later years you need to have many close social relationships. I'm covered. Those deer love to see me every morning. We get closer and closer with each passing day. Then there is Zazu, the African gray parrot. He is quite entertaining in good and some bad ways. We took him in after an elderly couple could no longer care for him. Parrots are very social and intelligent birds, and we try to take very good care of Zazu. He has an indoor cage, 2 jungle gyms, 2 outdoor cages, and a small portable carry case to use when he goes on walks with us. When we walk, I always carry Zazu, a bit concerned that he may somehow escape in my wife's care. Zazu can and does fly about the house, mostly in limited areas, although he is starting to walk around the place a little bit as well. A smart bird that talks, he's also potty trained. He picks up on most minor inflections in the voices of people he knows, especially my wife and I, probably more so than most humans. For instance, using my wife's voice, sounding nearly identical to her own, Zazu will often reply to questions that I ask my wife. His responses are in a very sarcastic "no" or "wow." His timing is unbelievable. He has a pretty good vocabulary for an African gray, and also puts together words to form short sentences, somewhat rare for this type. One phrase he nearly says every day is, "Craig, I love you." I did not teach him to say that, and there's a good story about how he learned that phrase, but it's too long for this writing. He may repeat this in a dozen times a day. Nearly each time he says it, I stop and give him the attention that he craves. It makes me wonder, who's training who? Now, pets can be expensive, costing about $5,000 a year for food and an average of $500 for vet bills. Then there was the kitchen remodel, $75,000, and the bathroom remodel, $20,000. Zazu was the reason for these required remodels. He actually had his own kitchen cabinet that he would open, crawl into, and hibernate for a few hours every day. Quite a shock to any unexpected guests. Cost of owning our pets? $100,000 plus. The joy of owning them? Priceless.
Well, we'll have this coda to the Independence Day weekend. A code red air quality was listed after the July fireworks in Washington, D.C. Residents of Washington, D.C. on Sunday briefly experienced the worst air quality of any major city in the world,
Whoa.
according to a company that ranks pollution globally, as the capital reckoned with the aftermath of a massive 40-minute 4th of July fireworks show. City officials issued a code red air quality alert, asking residents to limit time outside, with the warning that the air is unhealthy for seniors, kids, people with medical conditions, and that the general public may experience health issues. DC slipped down to number 26 on the air quality monitoring platform IQ Air by 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday. The show, organized by Freedom 250, a Trump-backed nonprofit, tasked with putting on a series of semi-quincentennial events,
Better you than me.
came as D.C. and the Northeast, more widely, suffered under an extreme heat wave. So once again, happy birthday, America.
Yes.
You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Buffalo News for Monday, July 6th. We read the Buffalo News live on weekday and Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. and rebroadcast at 4 p.m. For more information, call 716-821-5555. Your readers today have been
Ted Pajacki,
and Ed Howard, and we thank you for listening.
have a good
If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability.